Joining me now in the Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is Texas Senator Ted Cruz, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Maria, good morning. Good to be with you.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, Senator. Let's start with Iran, where dissent right now is being punished. I want to get your take on what President Trump should do regarding Iran.
Well, Maria, I have to say we are living in extraordinary times. The change that is occurring across the globe exceeds anything we have seen in decades. There is a very real possibility that in the next 6 months, the regimes in Iran, in Venezuela, and Cuba will all fall. There is a real possibility that Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba will all democratically elect new leaders, and instead of fomenting violence, fomenting attacks on America, instead of waging war on America, there is a real chance in the next 6 months that the people of those three countries will elect leaders who embrace freedom and free enterprise and who want to stand with America. And I got to say, if that happens, it is difficult to think of anything more consequential. You have to go back to the fall of the Berlin Wall and to America winning the Cold War without firing a shot to find a time as pivotal as where we are right now. If you look at Iran, Iran for 50 years has been the world's leading sponsor of terrorism. They have paid for and funded 90% of the funding of Hamas comes from Iran. 90% of the funding for Hezbollah comes from Iran. Iran funds terrorists all across the globe, including sending terrorists to, among other places, Venezuela, and targeting Americans. Right now, there are over 1 million Iranians that are showing unbelievable courage, standing up against this tyrannical regime. And I got to say, President Trump, I think, has been very strong in telling the regime, number one, we stand with the people, do not target, do not murder the protesters, telling the protesters, America stands with you. And I got to say, just in the last 2 days, a really important step occurred where President Trump came out unequivocally and said, it is time for new leadership in Iran. Yes. It is time for the Ayatollah Khamenei, his religious dictatorship, to end. I think that's massively important.
So what happens next? Because as you know, Senator, first the president said help is on the way and then pulled back a bit with this expectation that the killings have stopped. At that point, thousands of people had already been killed, and the people on the streets are hoping that the United States does something. Would you endorse that the U.S. goes in and takes action?
Well, look, I think the U.S. should be taking every step possible to end this regime. The Ayatollah Khamenei hates America. He regularly leads massive mobs chanting death to America. In fact, every year in Iran, they celebrate as a holiday Death to America Day. It's the anniversary of the Iranian Revolution and taking over the U.S. Embassy in 1979. And so the reason that President Trump ordered a B-2 attack on Iran's nuclear facilities is he made the right decision as commander-in-chief that if that theocratic dictator got nuclear weapons, the odds were unacceptable that he would use nuclear weapons to murder thousands or even millions of Americans. That was the single most important foreign policy decision the president has made this second term. And when it comes to the protest, I think what is most important is making clear that America is with the people. Contrast this to 2009. 2009, you had the so-called Green Revolution in Iran. The Iranian people were rising up there. But Barack Obama made a very different decision. He was a new president. He decided that America stands with the regime, stands with the Ayatollah, and they discouraged the protest, and we wasted that opportunity. Right now, the president has made clear, he made clear to the Ayatollah, if you are murdering the protesters, you will pay the price. He called on the Iranian people, make a list of everyone engaged in acts of violence. Look, that is powerful because it causes the IRGC members, the soldiers, to pause and think before they carry out those murders. I hope and believe that America is doing everything we can to support the protesters on the ground. There are lots of steps we can and should be taking, short of a bombing strike. And I have every belief that if the Ayatollah engages in mass murder against the protesters, that President Trump will order direct military responses. So this is a moment where the Ayatollah and mullahs I think they're fundamentally weakened. They are weakened by the fact that last year they lost a war. And you know, sometimes people forget there are real-world consequences to losing a war, not just communication, not just messaging, but real-world. In the 12-day war, they utterly and completely lost it. If you're a dictator, your strength depends on convincing your people that you are invulnerable, that you cannot be beaten. Even worse than losing a war, if you're an Islamist dictator, is losing a war to Israel. That's what happened to the Ayatollah, which is why I predicted months ago we would see what we're seeing now, the Iranian people rising up with President Trump's support. I think we're at a moment of pivotal change.
But, Senator, the Iranian government doesn't want anyone to see what's going on the ground. I saw one report that if you go out in the street right now in Iran and you're a protester, you will be shot dead immediately. So what are they doing? They're yelling from their windows, "Death to the Khomeini," and "down with the regime" from their windows so that they don't have to go down. I want to get your take on what we should be doing in that regard, because the government reportedly planning to permanently sever its citizens from the global internet. That's from the New York Post this morning, confirming that instead they wanted to have a state-run system as part of this crackdown on dissent. And then there's Greenland. The president with this bold idea, he is slapping tariffs on European nations right now, days before he's about to see many of them when he goes to Davos, Switzerland, for the World Economic Forum. Before he sees them, he's slapping tariffs on them until what he calls a complete acquisition, a complete and total acquisition of Greenland. Your reaction?
Well, let me take those one at a time. When it comes to communications, you're right that the Ayatollah is trying to do everything he can to silence the Iranian people and to keep them in a news blackout. Is shutting down television, is shutting down internet, has shut down just about all TV, although I will say it's fairly amazing. The Ayatollah has been playing in Persian Tucker Carlson's podcast, which is just a stunning statement and a powerful indictment. I will say a real game changer on that is a decision that Elon Musk made to provide Starlink to Iran and provide it free of charge. That's transformational because, you know what, the Ayatollah can't shut down Starlink, and it's letting the Iranian people speak. We're getting videos, bootleg videos that are coming out via Starlink. That's really important to be able to communicate. It's one of the many ways that America has to support those who are rising up against tyrannies. When it comes to Greenland, I want to commend President Trump for being single-mindedly focused on America first, on U.S. economic interest and U.S. national security interest. I believe it is overwhelmingly in America's national interest to acquire Greenland. A year ago, as chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, I chaired a hearing on the benefits to the United States of America of acquiring Greenland. Now, some folks in the press, they clutch their pearls and they say, well, what do you mean acquiring Greenland? How could that happen? Look, the whole history of America has been a history of acquiring new lands and new territories. Whether you go back to Thomas Jefferson making the Louisiana Purchase, about half of the United States of America today, or you go back to America purchasing Alaska from Russia. You want to talk about, at the time they called it Seward's Folly, it turned out to be an extraordinarily consequential purchase. Greenland has massive rare earth minerals and critical minerals. There are enormous economic benefits to America. But it's also, like Alaska, it is located on the Arctic, which is a major theater for potential military conflict with either Russia or China. It's also critical for the Golden Dome and defending America from potential missile strikes. I commend the president for focusing on American national security.
Yeah. Because where it is geographically can help stop any missile fire coming from adversaries like Russia and China. Senator, it's great to catch up. We so appreciate your time. We'll be watching your work as always, sir. Thank you. Senator Ted Cruz.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.